My ex wanted me back, but only after I became rich. I never thought I'd see her again, not after the way she left. 3 years ago, Melissa walked out of my life with nothing more than a sigh and a sentence that haunted me for years. You have no ambition, Eric. I can't waste my time on someone who's going nowhere. At the time, she was right. I was broke, stuck in a dead-end job, and had no real plan for the future. Melissa was everything I wasn't. Polished, ambitious, always looking for the next best thing. And clearly, I wasn't it. She moved on fast. A month after our breakup, she was dating some rich guy, flaunting expensive vacations and designer bags all over social media. I tried not to care, but deep down, I did. The humiliation burned inside me, fueling something I never knew I had, a relentless desire to prove her wrong. So, I got to work. I buried myself in self-improvement books, learned about finance, and taught myself skills that actually made money. I started a small tech business from my tiny apartment, coding late into the night, surviving on ramen and coffee. It was brutal. I failed more times than I could count, but I refused to give up. And eventually, I made it. 3 years later, I wasn't just successful. I was wealthy. My startup exploded, landing me in a world I once only dreamed about. Luxury cars, penthouse views, exclusive parties. I had it all. Then one night at a high-end gala, I saw her, Melissa. She looked just as stunning as I remembered, if not more. But the moment her eyes landed on me, something in her expression changed. Surprise, recognition, then interest. She made her way over, her lips curling into a smile. "Eric?" she said, her voice sweet, almost nostalgic. "Wow, I can't believe it's you." I could tell exactly what she was thinking. I wasn't the same man she had walked away from, and she wanted me back. But this time, the game had changed. Melissa's eyes sparkled as she stepped closer. Her perfume, a scent I once loved, now feeling like a carefully crafted weapon. "Eric," she said again, her voice dripping with warmth. "It's been so long. You look amazing." I smiled, taking a sip of my whiskey. "It has been a while, hasn't it?" I kept my tone cool, unreadable. I wasn't the same desperate guy she left behind. Her fingers lightly touched my wrist. "I had no idea you were doing so well. What have you been up to?" I almost laughed. "Oh, now you care?" But I played along. "Oh, just building my company, traveling, you know? The usual." Her eyes widened. "Wait, you own that tech company everyone's been talking about?" Bingo. There it was. The moment she realized I wasn't just doing well, I was thriving. Melissa's smile grew wider, and she tilted her head in that flirty way she used to when she wanted something. "That's incredible, Eric. I always knew you had potential." I nearly choked on my drink. Potential? The same potential she had stomped on and walked away from 3 years ago? She laughed lightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know, I was actually thinking about you the other day. We had so many good times together." I raised an eyebrow. "Did we? Because I seem to remember you saying I wasn't going anywhere in life." Her smile faltered, but only for a second. "Oh, Eric, that was so long ago. We were young. I was just scared. I didn't mean it." Didn't mean it? The words replayed in my head like a bad joke. I could see what was happening. Melissa had always been drawn to success, and now that I had it, she was rewriting our history. And she wanted back in. "We should catch up sometime," she continued, placing a hand on my arm. "Maybe dinner? Just like old times?" I studied her for a moment. If this were 3 years ago, I would have jumped at the chance. But now, I saw her for who she really was. I leaned in slightly, just enough to see her eyes light up with expectation. Then, with a smirk, I simply said, "I'll think about it." Then I walked away, leaving her standing there, just like she had left me years ago. I walked away without looking back, but I could feel her staring after me. I knew exactly what was going through Melissa's mind. She wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by a man she once had wrapped around her finger. I smirked to myself as I mingled with other guests at the gala. I had no intention of falling into her trap again, but that didn't mean I couldn't have a little fun. Later that night, as I stepped out onto the rooftop terrace for some air, I heard her voice behind me. Eric. I turned slowly. She stood there, a glass of champagne in her hand, looking every bit the glamorous woman she always wanted to be. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she gave me a slow, deliberate smile. You really weren't going to say yes to dinner? She asked, her tone teasing but with an edge of frustration. I took a sip of my drink, keeping my expression unreadable. Didn't seem necessary. We already know how that story ends. She stepped closer, just enough for me to catch the familiar scent of her perfume. Maybe it doesn't have to end the same way. Ah, there it was. The invitation. The what if? The attempt to make me question everything. Years ago, I would have fallen for it. But not this time. I chuckled. Melissa, let's not pretend. You weren't interested in me when I was struggling. And that's fine. I don't blame you for wanting more out of life. But let's be honest, you're not here because of me. You're here because of what I have. She blinked, caught off guard for the first time. That's not true. I gave her a knowing look. Really? If I was still the same broke guy working a dead-end job, would you be standing here right now? Silence. That was all the answer I needed. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, to convince me that this was about us. But we both knew the truth. Finally, she sighed, swirling the champagne in her glass. People change, Eric. I nodded. Yeah, and I did. I glanced at my watch, then looked back at her with a polite smile. It was nice seeing you, Melissa. Take care. Then I walked away. Again. But this time, it wasn't just about proving something to her. It was about proving something to myself. That I had finally let her go. I thought that was the end of it. That I had walked away for good. That Melissa would take the hint and disappear back into whatever world she had built for herself after leaving me. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a text. Melissa. Hey, I know the other night was unexpected. Can we talk? Just for old time's sake? I stared at the message for a moment. Old time's sake? What was there to talk about? She made her choice years ago, and I had made mine the other night. I should have ignored it. But some part of me was still curious. Not because I wanted her back. Those feelings had died a long time ago. But I wanted to know. Know if she would actually admit the truth. So, against my better judgment, I replied. Me. Sure. 1 coffee. No expectations. She responded almost instantly. Great, tomorrow at noon. That little cafe on 5th? She remembered my favorite spot. Interesting. The next day, I arrived 5 minutes early, out of habit. The cafe was quiet, a contrast to the noise of the city outside. It felt strange being there, knowing that just a few years ago, I used to sit in that very place, dreaming about the life I now had. Melissa walked in right on time, dressed perfectly, as always. When she saw me, her face lit up like we were 2 long-lost lovers finally reuniting. Eric. She smiled as she sat down. I'm really glad you came. I nodded, sipping my coffee. So, what's on your mind? She exhaled, like she had been rehearsing this conversation in her head. I wanted to say I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I was immature back then. I thought success was something you had to chase, and I didn't realize you were on your own path. I should have believed in you. It was the apology I never thought I'd hear, but I wasn't sure if I believed it. I leaned back. So, what changed? She hesitated for a second. Just a second. But it was enough. I changed, she said finally. I see things differently now. And when I saw you at the gala, I don't know. It felt like fate. Fate. I almost laughed. She wasn't here because of fate. She was here because she realized I had something she wanted, and maybe deep down she regretted choosing wrong. I set my cup down and met her gaze. Melissa, let's not do this. Her smile faltered. Do what? Rewrite history. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. You didn't leave because you were immature. You left because I wasn't rich, because I wasn't a shortcut to the life you wanted. And now that I have it, you suddenly think we're meant to be? I shook my head. That's not how it works. Her eyes flickered with something. Anger, embarrassment, regret. Maybe all three. That's not fair, she said quietly. People make mistakes. I nodded. Yeah, and some mistakes you can't undo. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt heavier than it should have. Finally, she sighed, stirring her untouched coffee. I guess I deserved that. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table. Take care, Melissa. And this time, when I walked away, I didn't expect a text. I didn't expect another apology. I didn't expect anything. Because for the first time in my life, I truly didn't care anymore. I walked out of the cafe, expecting that to be the final chapter. But life had a funny way of surprising me. A week later, I got an unexpected call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something told me to pick up. Eric? A familiar voice asked. Melissa. I sighed, already regretting answering. What do you want, Melissa? There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice came through, softer this time. I need your help. That caught me off guard. Help? She hesitated. Can we meet? Please, just one more time. Every instinct told me to say no, to shut the door completely, but curiosity got the best of me. Fine, my office. Tomorrow, noon. She agreed. The next day, my office. When she walked into my office, she looked different. Less polished, less confident. There was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Worry. All right, I said, crossing my arms. What's going on? She bit her lip, looking genuinely nervous. I made a mistake, Eric. I smirked. Yeah, we've been over that. She shook her head. Not just with you. With everything. I leaned back. Go on. She sighed. Remember that guy I left you for? Mark? I nodded. Of course, I remembered. The rich guy she thought was her ticket to the good life. He wasn't who I thought he was, she continued. At first, everything was perfect. Luxury, parties, the life I always wanted. But it was all a lie. He was deep in debt, borrowing money, making bad deals. Then one day, he just disappeared. I raised an eyebrow. Disappeared? She nodded. Left me with nothing. No money, no home. I lost everything. For the first time since seeing her again, I saw Melissa without the facade. No arrogance, no manipulation. Just someone who had bet on the wrong future and lost. But I wasn't sure how much of this was genuine, and how much was just another attempt to pull me back in. And now you're here, asking me for what exactly? She exhaled. I need a job, Eric. That actually made me laugh. You want me to hire you? She looked down, ashamed. I know I don't deserve it, but I don't know where else to turn. I studied her carefully. The old me would have jumped at the chance to be the nice guy and help her out. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I'll think about it, I said, the same words I had used on her at the gala. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Really? I nodded. Yeah, but not as my assistant or anything close to me. If I give you a chance, it'll be at the bottom. Entry level. No special treatment. She swallowed. I understand. I smirked. And if you quit the moment something better comes along, don't expect another favor. She nodded. I won't. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something neither of us saw coming. I gave Melissa the job. Not out of pity. Not because I still had feelings for her. but because I wanted to see what she would do with a second chance. She started at the bottom, just like I promised. No fancy title, no executive privileges, just another employee in my company. At first, she seemed determined. She showed up on time, did the work, stayed quiet. But over the next few weeks, I saw the cracks forming. The frustration in her eyes when she realized she wasn't special here. The way she glanced at the executives in the glass offices, her old hunger returning. Then, one day, it happened. I got a call from my head of security. "Eric, we have a situation. You should come down." I arrived at the security office, and there she was. Melissa, standing pale-faced as the guards replayed the footage on the screen. Caught. She had been stealing confidential company files. My files. I leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Well, I should have known. Her face was frozen in panic. "Eric, I can explain." I held up a hand. "No need. Let me guess. You thought you could sell this information? Maybe trade it for a shortcut back to the top?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew there was no way out. I sighed, shaking my head. "I gave you a second chance, Melissa. And you threw it away. Just like you threw me away." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, Eric, don't do this. I had nowhere else to go." For a moment, I considered letting her go. I had gotten my revenge just by watching her fall. But then I remembered the years I spent picking myself up after she left me in the dust. I turned to security. "Call the police." Melissa gasped. "Eric, no, you can't." I met her eyes, my expression unreadable. "You once told me I had no ambition, that I wasn't going anywhere." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Well, look at me now, and look at you." The guards moved in. She tried to fight, tried to beg, but it was over. As they dragged her away, she turned back one last time, her tear-streaked face full of regret. But it was too late. Melissa was nothing but a ghost from my past now. And I had finally closed the door. For good.